Hey guys, tonight we wander into those hushed, lonely places where your own voice seems to answer you back. A sun-dappled forest glen, a shadowy cave, perhaps a quiet mountainside. We're going to explore the poignant myth of Echo, the nymph whose fate was to lose her own words and only ever repeat the tail end of others. Imagine trying to win an argument, or even just order a complicated coffee, when you can only parrot back the last few syllables your conversational partner uttered. Yeah, you probably wouldn't survive that level of communicative frustration for long. Your barista would just give you a random latte out of sheer exasperation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know down in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I always find it fascinating to see our global community. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the verdant, sun-kissed mountains of ancient Greece, a landscape alive with the rustle of leaves, the murmur of hidden springs, and the distant calls of birds. This is the world of nymphs, and among them, once upon a time, lived a particularly vibrant spirit named Echo. Before she became the disembodied voice we associate with her name, Echo was an ored, a mountain nymph, full of life, laughter, and most notably, words. Her voice in these early days was her own, clear as a mountain stream, melodious as a nightingale, and as free as the wind that danced through the pines. Picture her, a youthful figure with eyes that sparkled with mischief, and a laugh that could make the wildflowers nod in appreciation. She wasn't just a pretty face in a pretty place. Echo possessed a mind as quick as her tongue, and her ability to weave tales and hold a listener captive was renowned among her peers. She would have moved with an easy grace through her mountainous domain, perhaps adorned with simple garlands of wildflowers, her bare feet familiar with every mossy stone and hidden deer path. The air around her would have thrummed not just with the sounds of nature, but with the constant, joyful outpouring of her own speech. She would sing songs to the rising sun, tell stories to the rustling trees, and engage in lively banter with her sister nymphs. Her voice a bright thread in the rich tapestry of the wild. Her voice wasn't just heard, it was practically a local landmark. Fellow nymphs might have said. Need to find the berry patch. Just head towards the sound of Echo going on about that amazing sunset she saw. Again, and you're almost there. Our mainstream historical fact for tonight is that the most famous and detailed ancient account of Echo's story, particularly her interaction with Narcissus and the reason for her curse, comes from the Roman poet Ovid in Book 3 of his epic work, The Metamorphoses, written in the early 1st century CE. Ovid was a master storyteller, and his version has profoundly shaped our understanding of Echo's tragic fate. He paints her as a creature of immense charm, whose very talent for speech becomes her undoing. Before the shadows fell upon her voice, Echo would have been a cherished companion. Nymphs, as we'll explore more, were often associated with specific deities, and it's easy to imagine the young Echo as part of the retinue of Artemis Diana to the Romans, the goddess of the hunt, roaming the wilderness with her band of attendants. Her storytelling abilities would have made her a welcome presence, enlivening the quiet moments around a campfire after a long day's chase. Imagine her at one of Artemis's woodland gatherings. She wouldn't just recount an event. She'd provide the sound effects, the witty asides, and perhaps even an impromptu song about the whole affair, leaving her audience enchanted. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while Ovid's version of Echo being cursed by Hera because of Zeus's affairs is the most famous, there are hints in other, sometimes earlier or more obscure, Greek texts of different traditions surrounding Echo. For instance, some accounts suggest Echo was pursued by the lustful god Pan. When she rejected his advances, an enraged Pan supposedly incited a group of shepherds to tear her limb from limb, scattering her voice across the earth. This is a much darker, more violent origin for her fragmented voice, though we will primarily follow the more widely known Ovidian narrative involving Hera and then later Narcissus. It just goes to show that even minor mythological figures often had multiple, sometimes contradictory backstories. Classicists still debate the original folkloric roots of Echo. Was she always conceived as a personification of reflected sound? Or did an existing nymph figure, perhaps with a different story, later become identified with the acoustic phenomenon we call an echo? But for now, let us hold on to this image of Echo in her prime, a creature of light and sound, her words flowing as effortlessly as water, her spirit untamed. Her greatest gift was her voice, her ability to communicate, to charm, to persuade, to entertain. It was a power she wielded with an almost childlike exuberance, unaware, perhaps, of its potential to lead her into peril. This vibrant, articulate nymph, so full of her own stories and songs, is the figure we must understand first, to truly grasp the depth of the tragedy that awaited her. A tragedy that would silence her own thoughts and condemn her to be nothing more than a hollow mimicry of others. The fall, when it came, would be all the more poignant because of the heights of expressiveness from which she. To truly understand Echo and the world she inhabited before her unfortunate transformation, we need to zoom out a little and immerse ourselves in the enchanting, often perilous, realm of nymphs in Greek mythology. These weren't just any pretty girls frolicking in the woods. Nymphs were minor female deities, spirits of nature, intrinsically linked to specific locations or natural phenomena. They were the personification of the wild, untamed beauty and sacredness of the landscapes the ancient Greeks revered. You can almost feel their presence as you imagine yourself walking through an ancient grove. The air alive with unseen energies, the rustle of leaves, perhaps the whisper of a dryad, the sparkle of a spring, the glance of a naiad. Our mainstream historical fact is that Greek mythology recognized many different classes of nymphs, each associated with a particular aspect of the natural world. Echo, as we mentioned, was an orid, a nymph of the mountains and grottos. But there were also naiads, who presided over fresh water sources like springs, rivers, and fountains. Dryads and hamadryads, who were spirits of trees, with hamadryads being so closely tied to their specific tree that they died if it was felled. Nereids, the 50 daughters of Nereus, who were sea nymphs embodying the beauty and bounty of the ocean. And Oceanids, daughters of Oceanus and Tethys, who were nymphs of the great outer sea or salt water. There were even lampades, torch-bearing nymphs of the underworld. It was a world teeming with these localized divinities, each a guardian and embodiment of her particular domain. Think of them as the original environmental guardians, only with better outfits and occasionally testy tempers. Nymphs were generally considered to be benevolent, or at least neutral towards mortals, though they could be dangerous if offended or if their sacred places were desecrated. They were often depicted as beautiful, youthful maidens, fond of music, dance, and accompanying more powerful deities like Artemis, goddess of the hunt, whom many nymphs served, Dionysus, god of wine and revelry, often attended by maenads, a type of frenzied nymph, or Pan, the rustic god of shepherds and flocks. You can picture them in idyllic settings, dancing in moonlit glades, bathing in secluded springs, their laughter mingling with the sounds of nature. Their existence was one of long, long life, not always fully immortal in the way the Olympian gods were, but certainly far exceeding human lifespans. Some believed a nymph's life might be tied to the longevity of the natural features she embodied, like a tree or a spring. Their connection to the divine was intimate. Nymphs frequently caught the eye of gods, particularly Zeus, Poseidon, and Apollo, leading to countless mythological tales of divine pursuit, seduction, or even assault. These encounters often resulted in demigod offspring, heroes who would go on to have their own adventures. But such divine attention was a double-edged sword. It could elevate a nymph, but also draw her into the dangerous and often cruel politics of the Olympian gods, especially incurring the wrath of jealous goddesses like Hera. This, as we will see, is precisely the kind of trouble that Echo would find herself in. It's like being a very popular intern in a company with a lot of office drama. You might get some perks, but you're also first in line for any collateral damage. For a quirky tidbit, some nymphs were believed to have prophetic abilities, or to be able to inspire mortals with poetic or artistic gifts. The muses themselves, the goddesses of the arts and sciences, are sometimes considered a special class of nymph. So, these weren't just nature spirits, they could also be conduits of divine inspiration and knowledge. Imagine seeking out a specific spring, not just for water, but hoping the naiad who resided there might whisper a solution to your writer's block, or give you a hot tip on the next chariot race. The nymph of the Castalian spring at Delphi was said to grant poetic inspiration if you drank from her waters, though presumably you had to bring your own recyclable cup. Classicists still debate the precise origins and evolution of nymph cults and beliefs across the diverse regions of the ancient Greek world. Were they remnants of earlier, pre-Hellenic nature worship, later incorporated into the Olympian pantheon? Or did they arise more organically from the personification of striking natural features? The sheer variety of nymph types and the local specificity of their cults suggest a complex tapestry of belief, woven from both widespread archetypes and localized folk traditions. Some nymphs had quite specific cult sites and received regular offerings, indicating their importance in the religious lives of ordinary people, not just as figures in grand myths. Echo, then, as an Oread, a mountain nymph, would have shared this heritage. She was a child of the wild, imbued with its sacred power, its beauty, and its potential dangers. Her world was one where the divine was immanent in every rock, tree, and spring. She was part of a vast sisterhood of nature spirits, beings who straddled the boundary between the mortal and the divine, embodying the vital, untamed forces of the earth. Understanding this context helps us appreciate her initial freedom, her connection to the natural order, and the profound tragedy of her later isolation and the loss of her own unique voice amidst the very mountains that were once her joyous home. Her fate wasn't just a personal misfortune, it was a silencing of one of nature's own vibrant expressions. We've established Echo as a vibrant Oread, a nymph of the mountains, living a life intertwined with the sacred energies of nature and the company of her fellow spirits. But every character, even in myth, often has a defining trait, sometimes a strength, sometimes a flaw, that propels their story forward. For Echo, her most remarkable quality, the one that made her stand out even among the loquacious sisterhood of nymphs, was her voice, not just its beauty, but its sheer, unadulterated, and almost ceaseless activity. Echo, to put it mildly, was a chatterbox, a silver-tongued conversationalist who adored the sound of her own words, and, by all accounts, was exceptionally good at using them. Imagine her in a gathering of nymphs. While others might share a thought or a short melody, Echo would be the one regaling them with elaborate stories, witty observations, and a constant stream of commentary on everything and anything. This wasn't necessarily a malicious trait in these early days. Ovid describes her as being not yet cursed to only repeat, but having a voice of her own and a tongue that was never still. She was, in modern parlance, the life of the party, the one who could keep a conversation going indefinitely, the one who always had another anecdote, another song, another amusing remark. You can picture her, words tumbling out like a sparkling waterfall, captivating her audience with her charm and linguistic dexterity. Her voice wasn't just a tool for communication, it was an expression of her very being, lively, engaging, and utterly irrepressible. It's like that one friend who narrates their entire day, but does it so charmingly you actually don't mind, most of the time. This gift of gab, this silver tongue, was undoubtedly one of her defining characteristics. Our mainstream historical fact here is that Ovid explicitly states Echo's talkativeness as a key element of her personality before her curse. He emphasizes that she was garrula, meaning talkative or loquacious. This isn't just a minor detail. It's crucial for understanding the specific nature of Hera's punishment, which, as we'll see, is a perfect, albeit cruel, a poetic justice tailored to Echo's particular crime of misusing her abundant speech. Her ability to talk and talk and talk was both her superpower and her Achilles heel. Her chattiness wouldn't have been limited to idle gossip, though one can imagine she enjoyed a good bit of nymphly news sharing. Given her association with wild places, she might have been a repository of nature's secrets, able to articulate the whispers of the wind, the stories of the ancient stones, the songs of the flowing streams. Perhaps she was the one who knew all the local lore, the histories of the sacred groves, the genealogies of the local river gods. Her voice could have been a source of delight and information, a vibrant link in the oral tradition that was so vital in the ancient world. Need to know which berries are safe to eat or where the crankiest old satyr hides his wineskin? Ask Echo, she'll not only tell you, she'll give you a 20-minute monologue on the philosophical implications of berry picking. Now, for a quirky tidbit. While Echo's talkativeness is central to Ovid's narrative, some interpretations could even link this to a form of power. In a world where rhetoric and persuasive speech were highly valued, think of the importance of oratory in ancient Greece. A nymph with such a skilled and tireless tongue might have wielded considerable influence in her own sphere. Perhaps she was the go-to nymph for mediating disputes among her peers, or for entertaining important divine visitors with her captivating narratives. Her voice was her currency, her art, her weapon, and her shield. Of course, as we'll see, a weapon can be turned against its owner, and a shield can have chinks. Classicists and literary scholars still argue about the precise moral judgment Ovid intends for Echo's garrulousness prior to the curse. Is it presented as an innocent, if perhaps slightly excessive personality trait? Or is there already a hint of a flaw, a lack of discretion, or an inability to hold her tongue that foreshadows her downfall? Ovid's tone is often playful and complex. He seems to delight in her cleverness even as he sets the stage for her punishment. Was her talkativeness inherently too much, or did it only become a problem when deployed in a specific, deceptive context? This nuance is part of what makes the myth so enduring. It's not a simple case of black and white. But for now, let her words flow. Picture Echo at her most voluble, her voice echoing through the mountains not as a mere repetition, but as a vibrant, original force. She is the queen of conversation, the mistress of monologue, a creature whose very essence seems to be woven from sound and story. This constant, exuberant use of her voice is the foundation upon which her tragedy will be built. The gods, especially the easily slighted ones, have a way of targeting one's greatest strengths when they decide to teach a lesson. And Echo, with her unstoppable tongue, was unknowingly chattering her way towards a confrontation that would silence her own thoughts forever, leaving her only the hollow remnants of words spoken by others. Her gift was about to become her curse. Echo's world of lively chatter and nymphly camaraderie, idyllic as it may sound, existed within the much larger, far more turbulent cosmos of the Olympian gods. And at the very top of that divine hierarchy, a celestial soap opera was in perpetual reruns, starring the king of the gods, Zeus, or Jupiter, as the Romans called him, and his perennially suspicious and rightfully jealous wife, Hera Juno to the Romans. Understanding this dynamic, this pattern of divine infidelity and queenly retribution, is absolutely key to understanding how Echo, a relatively minor mountain nymph, got caught in the crossfire. You can almost hear the dramatic organ music queuing up every time Zeus got that twinkle in his eye. Our mainstream historical fact is that Zeus, despite being the king of the gods and the upholder of cosmic order, was notoriously unfaithful to his wife Hera. His countless love affairs with goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women are a recurring theme throughout Greek mythology, forming the basis for a vast number of myths. These weren't just casual flings, they often had significant consequences, producing demigod heroes like Heracles, Perseus and Minos, inciting divine feuds and, most relevant to our story, constantly provoking Hera's formidable wrath. You can picture Hera with a permanent celestial headache, a divine private investigator's license, and a very, very long list of grievances. Not another conveniently lost shepherdess who happens to look suspiciously like a minor river deity. Zeus. My patience is wearing thinner than your excuses. Zeus was the master of disguise and deception when it came to his amorous pursuits. He'd transform himself into a shower of gold, a bull, a swan, an eagle, even a cuckoo, all to get close to his latest interest. He wasn't exactly subtle in his desires, but he put a lot of effort into the subterfuge, mostly to avoid Hera finding out, or at least to delay the inevitable divine showdown. The other gods and minor deities often found themselves in awkward positions, sometimes pressured to aid Zeus in his escapades, sometimes trying to stay out of Hera's path when she was on the warpath, which was often, it was a cosmic game of cat and mouse, or rather, cat and philandering tomcat god. Hera, on the other hand, was the goddess of marriage, women, childbirth, and family. Her marriage to Zeus was, ironically, supposed to be the divine archetype of matrimony. So his constant betrayals weren't just personal insults. They were an affront to her very domain and dignity. Her jealousy was legendary, and her punishments for Zeus's lovers and any unfortunate children resulting from these unions were often elaborate, cruel, and enduring. She turned Callisto into a bear, hounded Leto, mother of Apollo and Artemis, across the earth, preventing her from giving birth, and famously sent gadflies to torment Io, whom Zeus had turned into a heifer to hide her. Hera didn't forgive, and she rarely forgot. If Zeus was the king of clandestine dates, Hera was the queen of divine restraining orders and cosmic payback. This ongoing drama created a climate of tension and intrigue on Mount Olympus and throughout the mythical world. Nymphs, being beautiful and often residing in the secluded natural spots that Zeus favored for his trysts, were frequent targets of his affections and, consequently, frequent victims of Hera's vengeance. It was a dangerous game to be even tangentially involved in. You can imagine the nymphs whispering amongst themselves. Did you see Zeus heading towards the Whispering Falls again? And Hera was asking questions about who was on duty there today. Someone's about to have a really bad millennium. For a quirky tidbit, some scholars suggest that the myths of Zeus's numerous affairs and Hera's jealous rage might reflect, in a mythological way, the historical process of syncretism in ancient Greece. As the worship of Zeus spread and assimilated or supplanted local deities, many of whom were female, these local goddesses might have been demoted in the myths to become his conquests, with Hera representing a more dominant, pan-Hellenic queen figure asserting her authority. So, the divine drama could be a kind of theological power struggle played out in narrative form. It's like a corporate merger where the old company logos keep popping up as minor characters in the new CEO's biography. Classicists still debate whether Hera's character is portrayed with any sympathy in these myths, or if she is primarily a shrewish antagonist. While her rage is often destructive, it stems from genuine betrayal and the violation of her sacred role as goddess of marriage. Is she a figure to be pitied for her husband's incorrigible behavior? Or is her vengeance so disproportionate that she loses any claim to sympathy, Ovid? For example, often portrays her with a certain fearsome dignity, even as he details her vengeful acts. It's a complex portrait, not easily reduced to a simple villain tag. This, then, is the highly charged atmosphere into which our talkative nymph Echo is about to step. Zeus, ever on the lookout for a new romantic adventure among the lovely Oreads or their sisters. And Hera, ever vigilant, ever suspicious, are on a collision course. Echo, with her unique vocal talents, will find herself in a position to either aid the king of the gods or face the wrath of his queen. It's a classic dilemma: get involved in the boss's messy personal life, or try to stay invisible. Unfortunately for Echo, her nature was not one of invisibility. and her desire to please, or perhaps simply her inability to stop talking, would lead her to make a fateful choice. The stage is set for a divine confrontation, and Echo is about to be handed a starring, though ultimately tragic, role. So we have Zeus, the king of philanderers, constantly seeking out new romantic conquests among the nymphs. And we have Hera, his ever-watchful queen, determined to catch him in the act and punish those involved. Echo, our loquacious mountain nymph, with her charming voice and endless supply of chatter, is about to find herself smack dab in the middle of this Olympian marital strife. It wasn't that Echo was one of Zeus's lovers, at least not in the most common version of the myth. Instead, her role was that of an unwitting, or perhaps too witting, accomplice, using her greatest talent, her voice, to run interference for the king of the gods. Picture this: Zeus is down on earth, perhaps in a secluded mountain grove, enjoying the company of some lovely nymphs. He knows Hera's patience is wearing thin, and her celestial private investigators are probably already scouring the vicinity. He needs a diversion, a way to keep Hera occupied and off his trail while he concludes his divine diplomacy. This is where Echo, with her gift for captivating conversation, comes into play. Our mainstream historical fact, as vividly recounted by Ovid, is that Echo would deliberately engage Hera in lengthy conversations, using her storytelling abilities and charm to detain the goddess whenever Zeus was dallying with other nymphs nearby. She essentially became Zeus's verbal smokescreen. Imagine Hera, her suspicions aroused, descending from Mount Olympus with a thunderous expression, ready to catch her errant husband, red-handed. She sweeps through the forests and mountains, her divine senses on high alert. Just as she's closing in on Zeus and his current companions, she encounters Echo and Echo. Perhaps at Zeus's subtle prompting, or maybe just because she couldn't resist an opportunity for an extended chat with the Queen of the Gods, talk about a captive audience, launches into a story, or a series of stories, or an incredibly detailed commentary on the weather, the local flora, the latest gossip from the underworld. Anything to keep Hera pleasantly distracted. "Oh, Queen Hera, what a delight to see you. You simply must hear about this hilarious thing a satyr did the other day. It'll make your divine sandals curl." And then there was this fascinating cloud formation that looked exactly like Poseidon's trident. If you squinted a bit, Echo's voice, as we know, was enchanting. Her tales would have been witty, her descriptions vivid. She could spin a yarn so captivating that even the Queen of Heaven, despite her burning suspicions, might find herself momentarily diverted, listening with half an ear as Echo prattled on. And all the while, Zeus and his nymphly companions would seize the opportunity to make a discreet escape. By the time Echo finally ran out of diversions, or Hera's patience snapped entirely, the king of the gods would be long gone, leaving no trace but perhaps a faint scent of ambrosia and a few flustered-looking nymphs trying to appear innocent. Zeus here. "Goodness no, your majesty. We were just admiring the moss, weren't we?" Echo and Echo, still a little breathless from her marathon monologue, would innocently agree. This wasn't just a one-time occurrence. Ovid implies this was a regular tactic, often when Juno Hera might have surprised Jove Zeus in the company of nymphs on the mountainsides. Echo, artfully, would hold the goddess in long talk till the nymphs had time to escape. She became a sort of lookout and verbal bodyguard for Zeus's illicit affairs. It's a bit like that friend who can talk their way out of any situation, or in this case, talk others out of a sticky situation. Her talent was being weaponized, albeit in a charmingly distracting way. For our quirky tidbit, consider the sheer skill and nerve this would require. Distracting any deity, let alone the notoriously short-tempered Queen Hera, is a high-wire act. Echo wasn't just babbling, she was performing a delicate dance of diplomacy and deception, using her words to soothe, entertain, and misdirect a goddess whose wrath could shake the cosmos. It suggests a level of cunning and confidence in her vocal abilities that goes beyond simple talkativeness. She was, in essence, a master of the filibuster, ancient Greek style. Perhaps she even enjoyed the thrill of it, the power of holding a goddess in thrall with her voice. Another successful divine intervention by yours truly, she might have thought, dusting off her vocal cords. Zeus owes me a really nice cloud for this one. Classicists still argue about Echo's level of culpability in this deception. Was she a naive nymph, simply doing what the king of the gods subtly commanded or encouraged? Caught in an impossible situation? Or was she a more active participant, perhaps enjoying the favor she gained from Zeus? Or even relishing the chance to use her talents in such a high-stakes game? Ovid's portrayal allows for some ambiguity. He calls her artful prudence, which suggests deliberate skill rather than innocent babbling. Did she understand the full implications of repeatedly thwarting the queen of the gods? Or did she think her charm and Zeus's protection would be enough to shield her from any serious repercussions? Whatever her motivations, Echo was playing with divine fire. Her voice, once a source of joy and harmless chatter, was now being employed in the service of deceit, directly aiding and abetting Zeus in his marital infidelities and, more dangerously, making a fool of the powerful and proud Hera. The Queen of the Gods was not known for her sense of humor when it came to such matters. Each successful diversion, each moment Hera was delayed by Echo's captivating stream of words, was another mark against the nymph in the goddess's celestial black book. The fatal deception was unfolding, and the price for Echo's silver-tongued service was about to become devastatingly clear. Echo's artful deceptions, her talent for spinning captivating tales to shield Zeus's dalliances, could not go unnoticed by Hera forever. The Queen of the Gods was no fool. She was, after all, a goddess of immense power and perception. And while Echo's voice might have been charming enough to momentarily distract her, a pattern of such convenient interruptions would eventually become glaringly obvious. You can imagine Hera, after yet another fruitless search for her errant husband, only to find Echo full of innocent chatter and the nymphs conveniently dispersed, finally putting two and two together. The jig, as they say, was up. The moment of realization for Hera must have been one of cold, mounting fury. To be repeatedly tricked, to have her authority as queen and wife so blatantly undermined, and by a mere mountain nymph using the very gift of speech, it was an intolerable insult. This is our mainstream historical fact. Ovid recounts that Hera, finally understanding Echo's role in Zeus's deceptions, confronted the nymph and, in her divine anger, laid a curse upon her voice. The long, pleasant conversations, the artful delays, were over. It was time for divine justice, Hera style. Picture the scene. Hera, her eyes blazing with celestial anger, her voice perhaps starting as a low rumble of thunder, finally turns her full attention to Echo. The other nymphs, sensing the shift in atmosphere, have likely vanished into the trees like mist. Echo stands alone, perhaps her usual stream of words faltering for the first time as she sees the unadulterated rage in the goddess's face. There would be no more charming diversions, no more witty anecdotes. Hera, Ovid tells us, saw through the ruse. That tongue of yours, which has tricked me, the goddess declared, will have its power curtailed, and the use of your voice will be most brief. It's a chilling pronouncement, delivered with the absolute authority of an Olympian. You can almost feel the air crackle, the very sound of nature holding its breath. The curse itself was swift, precise, and devastatingly fitting. Hera didn't strike Echo mute entirely. That might have been too simple, perhaps even too merciful in its own way. Instead, she targeted the very essence of Echo's fault, her active, originating voice. From that moment on, Echo would lose the ability to speak her own thoughts, to initiate conversation, to spin her own tales. She would only be able to repeat the last few words spoken to her by others. Her voice, once a fountain of original expression, was now condemned to be a mere reflection, a hollow mimicry. You will still have the last word, Hera decreed, with a touch of cruel irony, but never the power to speak first. Imagine the horror dawning on Echo as she tries to respond, to plead, to explain, and finds that only the tail end of Hera's own damning words can issue from her lips. The immediate aftermath of the curse must have been terrifying for Echo, her greatest asset, her defining characteristic, the very tool she had perhaps unconsciously relied upon for her identity and her interactions with the world, was now fundamentally broken. She could hear, she could understand, but she could not speak in the way she always had. Her mind might be teeming with thoughts, with retorts, with sorrow, but her tongue was bound by Hera's divine decree. It's like a virtuoso pianist suddenly finding they can only play the last few notes of someone else's tune. A brilliant painter restricted to only tracing the final brushstrokes of another artist. The frustration, the helplessness, would have been immense. "Oh, this is just great," she might have thought. And if anyone had been there to say, "Great," she could only have replied, "Great, for a quirky tidbit." In some tellings or artistic representations, the curse is sometimes depicted as not just affecting her speech, but also beginning a process of her becoming more elusive, more tied to lonely places where echoes naturally occur. Her physical form might have started to seem less substantial, her connection to the vibrant community of nymphs already beginning to fray as her ability to fully participate in their conversations was stolen. It's as if the loss of her voice was the first step in her eventual fading from the world of full-bodied beings. Her identity was so tied to her voice that diminishing one inevitably led to the diminishing of the other. Classicists still debate the exact wording and nuances of Hera's curse as presented in different ancient sources or through interpretations of Ovid's Latin. For example, how much could she repeat? Just the very last word, a short phrase. Did the inflection of the echo have to match the original speakers, or could she imbue it with her own now unspoken emotion? Ovid says ultimus sonus, the last sound, and that she redoubles the voice geminat vocem. These small details can subtly shift our understanding of her communicative abilities, or lack thereof. Post-curse. Could she choose not to echo? Or was it an automatic, involuntary reflex? Ovid implies it's what she's able to do, not necessarily what she must do every time. Hera's fury had found its mark. The once loquacious nymph, whose voice could charm goddesses and shield the king of the gods, was now reduced to a mere vocal shadow. The curse was laid, the divine punishment delivered. Echo's life, and indeed her very essence, had been irrevocably altered. The world, for her, would never sound the same again, and she, in turn, would never be able to make it sound the way she wished. The stage was set for the next, even more tragic chapter of her story. Hera's curse was not a random act of divine petulance. It was a masterstroke of poetic justice, a punishment so perfectly tailored to Echo's specific transgression that it resonates with a chilling, almost artistic, cruelty. To truly understand why Echo was condemned only to repeat others, we need to appreciate this profound irony. Her crime, in essence, was the misuse of her own original copious speech for the purpose of deception. Her punishment, the complete removal of that original speech, leaving her only the ability to reflect, not create yumuk with her voice. It's a divine eye for an eye, or rather, a word for a word. Think back to Echo's talent. She was garrula, a chatterbox, capable of holding Hera in long talk. Her voice was a fountain of original expression, a tool she used artfully to weave narratives and distract the queen of the gods. She wasn't just passively standing by, she was actively, volubly, and repeatedly using her own words, her own stories even to mislead. Our mainstream historical fact is that the very nature of Echo's curse, being able to speak only the last words of others and never to initiate speech, directly mirrors and negates her previous ability to control conversations and speak at length for deceptive purposes. The punishment fit the crime with an almost mathematical precision. The irony is multi-layered. Firstly, Echo, who loved to talk and always had something to say, was now largely silenced. Her own thoughts, opinions, stories, and songs were trapped within her. She, who could fill the forest with her melodies and tales, could now only produce sound if someone else spoke first. It's like a renowned chef being condemned to only ever eat the leftover scraps from other people's plates. The very thing that defined her was taken away in its most essential form, her agency and speech. Secondly, the curse specifically targeted her ability to initiate. She could no longer start a conversation, offer an unsolicited opinion, or, crucially, spin a new deceptive tale. Hera ensured that Echo could never again use her voice to orchestrate a scenario, to control the flow of information, or to artfully delay someone with her own chosen words. By limiting her to repetition, Hera effectively neutered Echo's ability to be an agent of deception through original speech. She could only ever be a respondent, never an instigator. Want to tell another long, distracting story to protect Zeus? Echo, Hera might have sneered. Go on then, start one. Oh, wait. Thirdly, there's the irony of the last word. Hera's curse, as Ovid phrases it, allowed Echo to have the last word, but never the power to speak first. This sounds like a tiny concession, but it's a deeply sarcastic one. Having the last word in this context is not a mark of victory or control in an argument. It's a mark of utter dependency and powerlessness. Her last word is not her own. It's merely the tail end of someone else's statement, often making her sound mocking, simplistic, or agreeing when her heart might feel the opposite. It's a constant, frustrating reminder of her inability to express her true self. Our quirky tidbit here is to consider the psychological torment of such a curse for someone like Echo. For a nymph whose identity was so intertwined with her voice and her ability to communicate freely, this was not just a physical limitation, but a profound psychological blow. Imagine the constant frustration of wanting to warn someone, to express love, to ask a question, to tell a story, and being utterly incapable of forming the original sounds. Her inner world, once so vibrantly expressed, was now locked away. This internal suffering, this voicelessness of the self, is a key part of her tragedy, often overshadowed by the more famous story of her unrequited love for Narcissus. But it's the direct result of this ironic curse. She became an echo chamber not just of sound, but of her own imprisoned thoughts. Classicists and literary critics often discuss the Ovidian theme of metamorphosis as a form of divine justice, where the transformation or curse reflects the character's essential nature or their specific transgression. Arachne, the proud weaver who challenged Minerva, was turned into a spider. Forever weaving, Lycaon, who served human flesh to Zeus, was turned into a wolf. Echo's fate fits perfectly into this pattern. Her punishment is not arbitrary, it's a direct symbolic consequence of her actions. A transformation that makes her external reality a mirror of her misused talent. It's a common Ovidian motif: you become what you wrongfully do, or what defines your sin. So, the answer to why did she only ever repeat others lies squarely in Hera's ingeniously cruel and perfectly symmetrical retribution. Echo used her original voice to deceive. Therefore, her original voice was taken. She used copious speech to mislead. Therefore, her speech was reduced to mere fragments of others' words. She controlled conversations. Therefore, she lost all control over her own utterances. It was a divine sentence designed not just to punish, but to perpetually remind Echo, and anyone who heard her story or her voice, of the specific nature of her offense. Her voice became a living monument to the folly of misusing one's gifts, especially when dealing with a jealous queen of the gods. The curse has fallen. Hera's wrath, precise and terrible, has transformed Echo from a nymph of vibrant, original speech into a mere vocal reflection. The once ceaseless flow of her own words is damned, her ability to initiate, to tell, to persuade, utterly gone. You can almost feel the crushing silence descend upon Echo's inner world, a stark contrast to the lively chatter that once defined her. Her life, from this moment, becomes a study in frustration, isolation, and the torment of being a shadow of her former self, particularly in her ability to connect with others. Imagine Echo in the immediate aftermath. The woods, the mountains, her familiar haunts would suddenly seem different, quieter in a way that was deeply personal and painful. Her sister nymphs, who once delighted in her stories or perhaps occasionally wished she'd pause for breath, would now find interactions with her confusing, stilted, even unsettling. How do you have a conversation with someone who can only parrot back the end of your sentences? It's a lovely day, isn't it? Echo. One might say, Echo, she'd reply, or perhaps, day, Echo, or even just Echo. The subtleties of real communication, the give and take, the sharing of unique thoughts and feelings would be impossible. It's like trying to play a game of catch with someone who can only ever throw the ball back exactly 1 second after you do. In exactly the same way, the game quickly loses its joy and spontaneity. Her relationships would inevitably suffer. Friendships thrive on mutual understanding and expression. Echo, now unable to voice her own opinions, her fears, her joys, or even a simple original greeting, would find herself increasingly isolated. This is our mainstream historical fact. Ovid emphasizes Echo's withdrawal and shame after the curse. He describes her as shamed and hiding in the woodland, avoiding the very company she once thrived in. Her inability to communicate normally would make her an object of pity, perhaps even mockery or fear, among those who didn't understand the divine nature of her affliction. Poor Echo. She's not herself anymore. The other nymphs might whisper, their words then tragically partially repeated by Echo herself, self anymore. The vibrant Oread, once the life of any gathering, would now shrink from social interaction. The frustration must have been a constant torment. Imagine seeing a friend in distress and wanting to offer comfort, but only being able to echo their cries, or wanting to share an urgent piece of news, a warning, or a burst of inspiration, and finding your tongue utterly tied until someone else spoke the right trigger words. Her mind, presumably, was still as active as ever, full of observations, emotions, and the memories of her former eloquence. But it was all trapped, a vibrant inner world with no direct outlet. It's a particularly cruel fate for someone who, as Ovid states, had a body. She was not then just a voice. She was a full being, now communicatively crippled. Our quirky tidbit for this section is to consider the specific environments Echo would now be drawn to, or confined by: lonely places, caves, deep valleys, cliff faces. These are where physical echoes are most prominent. Did she consciously seek out these places because they resonated with her new condition, making her affliction feel almost natural, a part of the landscape? Or was it that in these isolated spots, her fragmented speech was less likely to cause confusion or draw unwanted attention? Perhaps these solitary locations became her refuge, where her repetitive voice could blend with the natural reverberations of the terrain. A mournful harmony. The rocks themselves seem to understand me now. She might have thought, and if a rock had rumbled, me now. Classicists and psychologists who study myth often explore the symbolic meaning of Echo's condition as representing a loss of agency or identity. When you cannot speak your own truth, when your voice is merely a reflection of others, do you begin to lose your sense of self? Echo's story can be seen as a powerful metaphor for the experience of being silenced, of having one's narrative controlled or erased by a more dominant power in this case, Hera. Her existence post-curse is a poignant exploration of what it means to be present yet unheard, to have a mind full of thoughts but no original way to give them voice. This period of Echo's life, after the curse but before her fateful encounter with Narcissus, is one of profound adjustment and sorrow. She is learning to live with her diminished self, a nymph defined by what she has lost. The mountains that once rang with her spontaneous songs and stories now only hear the fragmented replies she is forced to give. Her world has shrunk. Her spirit, though perhaps not broken, is undeniably bruised and reshaped by Hera's cruel, ironic justice. She is becoming, quite literally, an echo of her former vivacious self, a prelude to her even greater fading. The once bright, chattering stream of her voice had been reduced to a few carefully chosen, borrowed drops. Echo, now living with her curse, a shadow of her former talkative self, haunted the lonely, wild places. Her days were filled with the frustration of a mind teeming with thoughts she couldn't voice, and a heart longing for connection she couldn't initiate. It is into this muted, sorrowful existence that a new figure strides, a youth of such breathtaking beauty that he seemed almost a divine apparition himself. This, of course, is Narcissus, a name that has become synonymous with self-obsession, and his arrival will propel Echo's tragedy into its most famous and heartbreaking chapter. You find yourself now in a secluded part of the forest, perhaps near a clear, still spring, a place of quiet beauty, and soon, of fateful encounters. Narcissus, a youth of about 16, as Ovid describes him, is out hunting. He is the son of the river god Cephissus and the nymph Liriope. His beauty was legendary from birth. In fact, when Liriope consulted the prophet Tiresias about her son's future, asking if he would live a long life, Tiresias gave a typically enigmatic reply: if he never knows himself, a prophecy whose chilling accuracy would only become clear much later. This is our mainstream historical fact. Narcissus was renowned for his extraordinary physical beauty, which attracted widespread admiration from many, both nymphs and mortals, male and female. Though he arrogantly spurned all who pursued him, Narcissus is the epitome of youthful, unblemished perfection. Picture him hair like spun gold, skin as smooth as polished marble, eyes that hold the clarity of a summer sky. He moves with an effortless grace, completely unaware, or perhaps deliberately dismissive, of the trail of broken hearts and longing sighs he leaves in his wake. He is, in essence, a walking work of art, but one entirely wrapped up in its own perfection. He has a hard pride, as Ovid puts it. No one is good enough for him. He scorns the advances of countless admirers, finding them all unworthy of his exquisite self. It's like that person who has such impossibly high standards that they end up alone, except Narcissus's standards are so high, only he himself can meet them. Oh, another love letter from a smitten dryad. He might yawn. File it with the others, under utterly unworthy of my attention. His defining characteristic, therefore, is not just his beauty, but his profound vanity and cold disdain for the affections of others. He is emotionally unavailable to an extreme degree, locked in a world of self-admiration. This makes him a particularly tragic figure for Echo to encounter, given her own predicament. She, who longs to connect but cannot speak her mind, is about to fall for someone who could connect, but actively chooses not to, at least not with anyone other than himself. It's a recipe for disaster, a collision course between thwarted expression and impenetrable self-regard. Our quirky tidbit here is that some versions or interpretations of the Narcissus myth suggest his coldness wasn't just simple arrogance, but perhaps a kind of innocent or naive aloofness, at least initially. He might have been so overwhelmed by the constant, often aggressive attention his beauty attracted that he developed a defensive shell of indifference. Or perhaps he genuinely didn't understand the depth of feeling he inspired in others. being so absorbed in his own world. This doesn't excuse his later cruelty, but it adds a layer of complexity. It's like a child star who grows up so surrounded by adoration that they lose touch with normal human interaction. Only Narcissus's fame was based purely on his looks. Why is everyone always staring and sighing? He might genuinely wonder, can a guy just admire his own reflection in a stream without all this fuss? Classicists and psychoanalysts drawing on Freud, who famously used Narcissus for his concept of narcissism, still debate the precise psychological underpinnings of Narcissus's character in Ovid's telling. Is he a monstrous figure of vanity from the start? Or does his fatal self-love develop more gradually, perhaps even as a result of a divine curse or the prayers of a spurned lover? As some parts of the myth suggest, Ovid's portrayal is rich enough to support various readings. He shows Narcissus as being proud and disdainful of others before he sees his own reflection, suggesting an inherent character flaw rather than a suddenly imposed one. So, into Echo's quiet, lonely world, where her voice is but a fragment, steps this vision of untouchable beauty. He is hunting deer, moving through the forest with a grace that captivates anyone who sees him. Echo, hidden among the trees, is about to witness this perfection, and her already wounded heart is about to face its greatest trial. The hunter, Narcissus, so focused on his sport, is entirely oblivious to the unseen nymph whose fate is about to become irrevocably, tragically entangled with his own. The stage is set not for a dialogue of love, but for a painful exchange of misunderstood intentions and unrequited longing, all because of a proud youth and a nymph who could no longer say his name, or her own heart. First, Narcissus, in his radiant youthful beauty and cold self-absorption, wanders through the forest, a magnet for admiration he consistently spurns. And there, hidden among the trees, her own voice stolen, her heart already acquainted with sorrow, is Echo. As she lays eyes upon the hunting youth, a new and powerful emotion ignites within her, despite the cruel limitations imposed by Hera's curse. Echo, the nymph who can only repeat, falls deeply, hopelessly in love. You can imagine that moment. Echo, perhaps listlessly observing the forest life. Her day is a monotonous cycle of enforced silence and fragmented speech. Suddenly sees Narcissus. He is the embodiment of a beauty she has likely never encountered before, a perfection that seems almost divine. Ovid tells us, she saw Narcissus wandering through the lonely countryside, and, seeing him, she was inflamed and secretly followed his footsteps. Her heart, which had perhaps grown numb from the pain of her curse, is abruptly awakened. It's a classic case of love at first sight, but one freighted with an immediate and profound sense of impossibility. It's like falling in love with a movie star you see on screen, knowing they don't even know you exist. But for Echo, the star is right there, and the barrier is her own voice. This is our mainstream historical fact. Ovid clearly depicts Echo's immediate and passionate, though unvoiced, love for Narcissus. Her desire is intense, and she begins to follow him, longing for an opportunity to approach him, to somehow communicate the feelings palavra swelling within her. She longs to address him with sweet words and to employ soft prayers. But her curse prevents it. She can only wait with a trembling heart for him to speak first so she can seize upon his words. This sets up the exquisite agony of her situation. Her love is immense, but her ability to express it is almost non-existent. She trails him through the woods, a silent, unseen admirer. You can picture her, moving like a shadow from tree to tree, her gaze fixed on Narcissus. Every graceful movement he makes, every casual glance, only deepens her infatuation. She would burn with the desire to call out to him, to praise his beauty, to offer her companionship, but her tongue is bound. All the witty phrases, the charming compliments, the heartfelt declarations she was once so capable of, now die unspoken in her mind. It's an internal monologue of pure frustration. Oh, how beautifully the sunlight catches his hair, she might think. If only I could tell him, if only I could say anything. But all she can do is watch and wait and hope for him to utter some sound, any sound that she can catch in return. Her love is not a gentle affection. It's a flame, an ardor. This intensity makes her subsequent rejection all the more devastating. She isn't just mildly interested, she is consumed by this passion. And the more she follows him, the closer she wishes to be, the hotter her love burns. Ovid uses a powerful simile, just as the lively sulfur, smeared on the tip of a torch, snatches at fire brought near it. So she... This suggests an almost combustible attraction, ready to ignite at the slightest opportunity. She is drawn to him as inevitably as a moth to a flame, and perhaps with as little regard for the potential danger. Our quirky tidbit here concerns the nature of nymphly love. Nymphs in mythology are often depicted as passionate beings, capable of deep affection and fierce loyalty, but also sometimes as flighty or easily infatuated. Echo's love for Narcissus seems to be of the profound, all-consuming variety. Given her previous vivacious and communicative nature, it's possible that she longed for a deep connection, and Narcissus, in his idealized beauty, became the unfortunate object of that powerful, now stifled yearning. It wasn't just his looks. He represented a potential interaction, a focus for her trapped emotions. Perhaps she thought, if only he knew my heart. If only I could make him know. Curse or no curse, classicists and literary critics often analyze the theme of unrequited love in Ovid's Metamorphoses. And Echo's story is a prime example. Ovid explores the pain, obsession, and self-destructive nature of one-sided passion. Echo's love is doomed from the start, not only by Narcissus's self-absorption, but fundamentally by her inability to express her feelings in her own words. Her plight highlights the importance of communication in love. How can love flourish if it cannot be spoken? If understanding cannot be built through shared language? Her situation is an extreme metaphor for the difficulties many feel in expressing their deepest emotions. So, Echo follows. Her heart ablaze, her voice a prisoner. She is a silent devotee, worshipping at the altar of Narcissus's oblivious beauty. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig, might be him, might be an opportunity. She is waiting for a sound, a word, anything that will allow her to break her silence, even if only with a borrowed phrase. The tension builds. The beautiful boy, lost in his own world, and the lovelorn nymph, trapped in hers, are moving towards an encounter that will define both their myths. An encounter built on the tragedy of words that can only be repeated, never truly shared. Her hopeless love has bloomed, and its only possible fruit is sorrow. The stage is perfectly set for a tragicomedy of errors. Though with very little comedy for poor Echo, she, inflamed with a secret, unutterable love, shadows Narcissus through the woods. He, sublimely unaware of her presence or her passion, is simply going about his day, perhaps feeling a little lost after becoming separated from his hunting companions. The air is thick with unspoken longing on her part and blissful ignorance on his. Eventually, inevitably, Narcissus speaks, and the heartbreaking, stilted dialogue that follows is one of the most famous episodes in Greek mythology, perfectly illustrating the cruelty of Echo's curse. It begins when Narcissus, realizing he's strayed from his friends, calls out, "Is anyone here?" Or in Ovid's Latin, "Equis adest?" This is the moment Echo has been desperately waiting for. A sound, a word she can seize upon. With a surge of hope, however constrained, she replies, using the only power she has. Repeating his final word, here. Adesto. Hasi. This is our mainstream historical fact. The famous dialogue between Echo and Narcissus, as recorded by Ovid, is characterized by Echo's inability to say anything other than the last words or phrases spoken by Narcissus, leading to a frustrating and poignant misunderstanding. Narcissus, hearing a voice but seeing no one, is puzzled. He calls out again, "Come." Veni, and Echo, her heart leaping, eagerly repeats, "Come, Veni." You can imagine her desperate desire to bridge the gap, to make him understand, even with these borrowed fragments. He looks around, sees no one approaching, and perhaps a little annoyed or mystified. Calls out louder, "Why do you run from me? Quid me fugis?" Echo, tragically, can only parrot back, "Run from me. Me fugis?" This is where the misunderstanding deepens. He thinks she is actively avoiding him, perhaps playing a game, while she is doing the only thing she can do to engage with him. It's like a terrible game of call and response where one player has a severely limited script. "Seriously, are you just going to repeat everything I say?" He might exclaim in modern terms, and she'd be forced to reply, "Everything I say." The dialogue continues in this vein, a masterclass in mutual misapprehension. He invites her to join him. "Let us come together here, huc coamus." Echo, overjoyed at what she interprets as an invitation to unite, an expression of mutual desire, responds with her whole heart, using his own words, "Let us come together here, coamus." And with this, Ovid says, answering his every word, she came forth from the woods, ready to throw her arms around the neck she had hoped for. She steps out, her love and longing evident in her eyes, ready to embrace him. But Narcissus, seeing her emerge and misinterpreting her repeated, "Let us come together here," as a bold, perhaps unwelcome advance given his general disdain for all admirers, recoils in shock and disgust. He cruelly rebuffs her, saying, "Away with these encircling hands, may I die before you have enjoyment of me. Offer ab his amplexibus ante amorier, quam sit tibi copia nostri." It's a harsh, brutal rejection. Poor Echo. Her hopes dashed, her love thrown back in her face, can only reply with a fragment of his cruel wish, "You have enjoyment of me. Sit tibi copia nostri." This is perhaps the most heartbreaking part of their exchange. Her repetition in this context sounds almost like a desperate, wounded plea, or a sorrowful acceptance of his terms. Even though her heart is breaking, she is forced to echo his rejection of her. Our quirky tidbit here is the sheer theatricality of this scene. Ovid crafts it like a mini-play, full of dramatic irony. The audience or reader knows Echo's curse and her love, but Narcissus is entirely in the dark about both. His annoyance and her hopeful misinterpretations create a painful, dramatic tension. You want to shout at Narcissus. She can't help it. "You vain fool, she loves you." But, alas, he remains oblivious to the true tragedy unfolding. It's like watching a romantic comedy where one person is accidentally muted in the crucial video call. Signals are crossed. Feelings are hurt, all due to a communication breakdown. Classicists and literary scholars often analyze this dialogue for its exploration of themes of communication, miscommunication, and the limits of language. Echo's plight is an extreme example of how meaning can be lost or distorted when true. Original expression is impossible. Her repetitions are technically accurate, but they lack the context, intent, and emotional nuance of her own inner thoughts. It highlights how much of communication relies not just on words, but on the ability to initiate, to clarify, and to express a unique personal perspective. Narcissus hears words, but he doesn't, and perhaps can't, hear Echo's heart. The tragic, stilted dialogue is over. Echo has offered her love, as best she could within her cruel constraints, and Narcissus has unequivocally, cruelly rejected it. The brief spark of hope that ignited when he first spoke has been brutally extinguished. All that remains for Echo is shame, sorrow, and the beginning of her final, heartbreaking fade. Her attempt to connect, to bridge the gap imposed by Hera's curse, has ended in utter failure. The encounter in the woods, which Echo had approached with such desperate hope, has ended in disaster. Narcissus, with his characteristic coldness and vanity, has brutally spurned her advances, misunderstanding her repeated phrases as unwelcome boldness rather than the only form of communication left to her. "May I die before you have enjoyment of me, Hawaii," he had exclaimed, and Echo, heartbroken, could only parrot back a fragment of his cruel dismissal. The weight of this rejection, piled upon the existing sorrow of her curse, proves too much for the gentle nymph. You can see her, standing there in the forest clearing as Narcissus turns his back on her and stalks away, perhaps without a second glance. The vibrant hope that had briefly illuminated her eyes is extinguished, replaced by a profound shame and a grief that seems to consume her very being. This is our mainstream historical fact. Ovid describes Echo as being scorned. She lurks in the woods and hides her shamed face among the foliage. Hayag, she is utterly devastated by Narcissus's rejection, and her immediate reaction is to retreat, to make herself unseen, to flee from the source of her pain and the scene of her humiliation. Her love, so passionately felt, has been met with contempt. Her attempt to connect, however limited by her curse, has been rebuffed with a cutting disdain. There's nothing left for her to say, even if she could. The forest, once her playground and the witness to her vibrant voice, now becomes her hiding place, a refuge for her sorrow. You can imagine her stumbling away from that fateful spot, tears streaming down her face, the cruel words of Narcissus. Away with these encircling hands, Han is still ringing in her ears, a torment she cannot escape because her own voice might even be forced to repeat fragments of it if anyone else were to speak them. It's a double agony, the pain of his words, and the inability to voice her own grief in her own way. He hates me, she might think. And if a bird chirped, "Hates me?" the echo would confirm her despair. This rejection accelerates a process that perhaps began with Hera's curse. Echo's slow fade from the world. Her grief is not a fleeting sadness. It's a deep, corrosive despair that consumes her from within. Ovid tells us that from that time on she lives in lonely caves. The company of other nymphs, already strained by her inability to communicate, would now be unbearable. How could she face them after such a public, in her mind, and painful rejection? How could she endure their pity, or worse, their attempts at conversation that would only highlight her vocal imprisonment? The solitude of caves and deep woods becomes her only solace, a place where her fragmented voice can merge with the natural echoes of the landscape without causing further pain or misunderstanding. It's like someone going through a terrible breakup and just wanting to disappear from the world. Only Echo's disappearance is about to become much more literal. Our quirky tidbit here is the subtle but significant difference in how various artists and writers across the centuries have depicted Echo's emotional state after the rejection. Some portray her as purely tragic and passively fading. Others hint at a lingering resentment or a desire for Narcissus to somehow understand the pain he caused. In some interpretations, her eventual disembodied voice isn't just a sad remnant, but also a kind of haunting, a perpetual reminder of unrequited love and cruel dismissal, forever clinging to the places where such dramas unfold. It's the difference between a gentle sigh fading on the wind and a mournful whisper that refuses to be entirely silenced. You'll be sorry. Her inner voice might scream, but only a faint, "Sorry. Sorry." It might be audible if someone nearby happened to utter the right phrase. Classicists and literary scholars often explore the psychological realism in Ovid's portrayal of Echo's grief. Her retreat, her shame, her wasting away. These are recognizable human reactions to profound emotional trauma and rejection. Even though she is a mythological nymph, her suffering feels relatable. The myth taps into universal experiences of unrequited love, the pain of not being seen or understood by the object of one's affection, and the feeling of diminishing self-worth that can follow such a blow. Is her fading purely a magical consequence? Or is it also a metaphor for how such deep emotional wounds can make a person feel like they are disappearing, losing their substance and their place in the world? Narcissus, meanwhile, continues on his oblivious way, leaving a trail of spurned lovers. Echo being only the latest and perhaps most tragically impacted. He doesn't understand, nor does he care about the devastation he has wrought. His heart is closed to any feeling but self-admiration. For Echo, however, this rejection is a fatal blow. Her already compromised existence has been dealt another more personal wound. The nymph who once filled the mountains with her vibrant, original song is now retreating into silence and shadow, her heart echoing with a sorrow that will begin to consume her very form. The path to becoming only a voice is now tragically clear. Echo's rejection by Narcissus was not just a painful emotional blow, it was the catalyst for her ultimate physical demise. Consumed by her unrequited love and the shame of his scorn, she retreated further and further into the lonely places of the earth, her grief literally eating away at her. This is where her story takes its most ethereal turn, as the nymph of flesh and blood begins to dissolve, leaving behind only the persistent, disembodied voice that would forever bear her name. You can picture her in those last days or weeks, a forlorn figure in a secluded cave or a deep, forgotten valley. The vibrant energy that once characterized her has been extinguished. Ovid paints a poignant picture of her decline. Her love, however, clings and grows on grief. Her wretched body wastes away with wakefulness. An anxious yearning makes her thin and wan. Her skin is wrinkled, and all her body's moisture dries into the air. This is our mainstream historical fact. According to Ovid, Echo's physical body gradually wasted away due to her unrequited love for Narcissus and her deep sorrow, until only her voice and her bones, which were said to have turned to stone, remained. Her love, paradoxically, grows on grief. The more she suffers, the more her hopeless passion seems to consume her. It's a destructive cycle. She can't eat. She can't sleep wakefulness or vigilante cura. Her physical form begins to mirror her emotional state. She becomes thin, pale, desiccated. The vibrant Oread who once danced in the mountain sunlight is now fading like a flower deprived of water and light. It's a slow, agonizing disappearance, a physical manifestation of her heartbreak and her inability to express her true self. Her body, which was once alive with movement and her own voice, is now failing her, just as her voice had failed her in communicating her love. If only he knew. She might lament internally, but no sound of her own could escape, and her form grew ever more insubstantial. The details of her fading are poetically stark. Her skin wrinkles, the moisture leaves her body. It's as if the very life force is ebbing away, unable to be sustained by a love that finds no reciprocation and a voice that finds no original outlet. The world around her, the nature she was once so attuned to, now seems indifferent to her plight, or perhaps it is simply reabsorbing her essence. The nymph, a spirit of a specific place, is now becoming even more deeply enmeshed with the inanimate features of that place. Then comes the final transformation. Only her voice and bones were left. At last her voice alone remains. Her bones, they say, were turned to stone. This is a powerful image. All that was soft and yielding, all that was physically her, vanishes. The hard, enduring parts, her bones, become part of the very rock of the mountains she inhabited, a silent testament to her stony grief. And her voice, that defining characteristic, is now untethered from any physical form. It becomes a pure phenomenon, a sound without a source, forever haunting the lonely places, compelled to repeat the final utterances of others. She has, quite literally, become an echo. Our quirky tidbit here is the mention of her bones turning to stone. This isn't just a poetic flourish, it connects her to the very landscape she was a nymph of. Oreads are mountain nymphs, By her bones becoming stone, she merges permanently with her domain, a sorrowful petrification. You can almost imagine hikers in ancient times stumbling upon unusually shaped rocks in a cave and whispering that they were the bones of the unfortunate Echo, a tangible reminder of her sad tale. It adds a layer of physical permanence to her myth, grounding her ethereal voice in the very fabric of the earth. Listen, one might say. The wind sighs through Echo's bones, and her voice answers. Classicists and folklorists sometimes explore the etiological nature of this part of the myth. That is, how it serves to explain a natural phenomenon. The story of Echo's physical demise and the survival of her voice provides a compelling mythological origin for the acoustic echo. Why do sounds repeat in certain places? Because the ancient Greeks might say, it is the lingering voice of the heartbroken nymph Echo, forever condemned to repeat what she hears. This transformation from a being into a natural phenomenon is a common feature in Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's a way of weaving human-like stories into the workings of the natural world, making the landscape itself a repository of myth and meaning. So, Echo, the once vivacious, talkative nymph, is gone. Her body has wasted away, consumed by sorrow and unrequited love. Her bones have become part of the silent stone. All that remains is her voice, not her own voice, but the ability to reflect the sounds made by others. It is a voice stripped of agency, a voice of pure repetition, a haunting reminder of a love that could not be spoken and a grief that could not be contained. Her tragedy is complete in its sorrow, but her story and her voice are about to find a new, albeit equally tragic, counterpart in the fate of the one who caused her such pain. Narcissus. Echo has faded into a disembodied voice, her love for Narcissus unrequited, her physical form consumed by grief. But the story doesn't quite end there, at least not for the cause of her sorrow. Narcissus, who so cruelly spurned Echo and countless others, is not destined to escape unscathed. The gods, or perhaps the very nature of his own flaw, have a reckoning in store for him. His fate is a perfect mirror to Echo's, a tale of self-absorption leading to its own unique, watery demise. And it's a punishment that some say was called down by the prayers of those he had wronged. After his harsh dismissal of Echo, Narcissus continues his solitary, self-admiring way. Ovid tells us that one of the many youths he had scorned uttered a prayer, so may he himself love, and not gain the thing he loves. This prayer, resonant with a desire for retributive justice, is heard by the goddess Nemesis, the divine dispenser of retribution against hubris and undeserved fortune. And Nemesis, being the efficient and often ironic deity she was, grants the wish. This is our mainstream historical fact. The myth typically recounts that Narcissus is eventually punished for his arrogance and cruelty towards his admirers by being made to fall in love with his own reflection. The setting for his downfall is, poetically, a perfectly clear, untouched spring. A pool of water so still and pure it acts like a flawless mirror. Weary from hunting, and thirsty, Narcissus stoops down to drink. As he does, he sees an image of breathtaking beauty looking back at him from the water's surface. It is on, of course, like his own reflection, but in his self-absorbed naivety, or perhaps due to Nemesis's curse taking hold, he doesn't recognize it as such. He is instantly captivated, falling hopelessly in love with the beautiful boy in the pool. He desires, unknowing, what is himself. Ovid writes, and praises and is himself the thing he praises. He is now experiencing the same helpless, all-consuming infatuation that Echo and his other spurned lovers felt for him. The tables have turned with a vengeance. You can picture him there, kneeling by the pool, utterly transfixed. He tries to kiss the lips he sees, to embrace the form in the water, but he only meets the cool, unyielding surface. He speaks to the reflection, pleading with it, wondering why this beautiful being seems so close yet so unattainable, so responsive to his expressions yet unwilling to emerge. He doesn't understand that the object of his desire is intangible, a mere image. His frustration mounts. He, who had never felt the pangs of love for another, is now consumed by a passion for a beloved who can never truly be his. It's like trying to hug a hologram, an exercise in utter futility and mounting despair. Why do you tease me, lovely boy? He might cry to the reflection, unaware of the profound irony. And where is Echo in all this? Ovid tells us that even as a disembodied voice, she is still drawn to Narcissus, still pining for him. She witnesses his new, self-directed torment. Though he had scorned her, she, when he sighed also. When Narcissus, in his despair, cries out, "Alas, who?" Echo's voice repeats, "Alas," when he beats his breast in anguish. She reflects the sounds of his grief. There's a deep pathos in this. Even in her faded state, her love, or perhaps a sorrowful empathy, persists. She becomes the disembodied chorus to his personal tragedy, her voice underscoring his suffering, a constant reminder of the pain of unrequited love he himself is now experiencing. Our quirky tidbit here is that, in some less common versions of the myth, or in later artistic interpretations, there's a sense that Echo's presence almost actively contributes to Narcissus's delusion by echoing his lovelorn cries, making him think the boy in the water is responding, however faintly. While Ovid doesn't explicitly state this causal link for his delusion, the idea of her voice, however fragmented, playing a role in his fixation, adds another layer of tragic entanglement. It's as if they are locked in a perpetual cycle of misunderstood, reflected desire. Classicists and psychoanalysts continue to explore the symbolic meaning of Narcissus's fate. His inability to recognize himself, his desire for an impossible union with his own image, is seen as the ultimate representation of destructive self-love, an inability to form healthy relationships with others because of an all-consuming preoccupation with the self. His punishment is not just to love in vain, but to be confronted by the barrenness of a love that can only be directed inward. It's a stark warning against vanity and the failure of empathy, just as Echo wasted away from her unrequited love. Narcissus, too, begins to pine away beside the pool, neglecting food and rest, consumed by his impossible passion for his own reflection. His beautiful form begins to fade. The symmetry of their fates is striking. She, who could not express her love, faded to a voice. He, who could not accept love from others, fades from his love of self. Nemesis's justice is complete. The beautiful, cruel youth is finally experiencing the torment he so casually inflicted on others, with Echo's sorrowful voice as his only and equally tormented companion. Narcissus, trapped by his own reflection, consumed by an impossible love for the image in the water, is nearing his end. Just as Echo's physical form dissolved from grief, Narcissus too wastes away, his vibrant beauty dimming as he pines for a love that can never be truly grasped. His final moments are a poignant echo of the sorrow he inflicted, and the legacy of both his and Echo's stories continues to resonate through language, art, and our understanding of human nature. As Narcissus lies dying by the pool, his strength failing, he utters his last words. Looking at his beloved reflection, he laments, "Alas, boy, loved in vain. Farewell. Ho, frustra delectapur, val." And Echo, ever present though unseen, her love still lingering even for the one who caused her such pain, faithfully repeats his final, sorrowful cry, "Farewell. Veil." With that, Narcissus expires. This is our mainstream historical fact. Narcissus dies pining for his own reflection, and in his place, a new flower. The Narcissus often identified with the daffodil or a similar bloom springs up, its head often bowed as if still gazing into the water. This flower becomes a perpetual symbol of his beauty and his tragic, self-absorbed fate. You can picture the scene: the once proud and radiant youth, now a lifeless form by the silent pool. The nymphs of the wood and water, perhaps even his spurned admirers, including Echo's spectral voice, mourn for him. They prepare a funeral pyre, but when they come to fetch his body, it is gone. Only the delicate trumpet-shaped flower with its white petals and yellow corona remains. The transformation is complete. He, like Echo, has become a part of the landscape, a beautiful but melancholic reminder of a flawed existence. His story, like hers, becomes an ideological myth, explaining the origin of a specific flower and its characteristics. See how the narcissus flower bends its head towards the stream. An ancient Greek might say, it is Narcissus, still captivated by his own beauty, even in floral form. The legacy of Echo, our primary focus, is twofold. Firstly, she gives her name to the acoustic phenomenon we experience in lonely places, the repetition of sound. Her story provides a mythological explanation for why voices rebound from cliffs and cave walls. It's her, the heartbroken nymph, forever bound to repeat the last words she hears. This connection is so strong that her name is the word for the phenomenon in many languages. It's a powerful example of how myth can shape language itself. Every time you hear an echo, you are, in a sense, hearing the lingering voice of this ancient oread. Secondly, Echo's story serves as a profound and cautionary tale about the power of words, the pain of unrequited love, and the consequences of both divine anger and human cruelty. Her initial gift of copious, charming speech, when misused, albeit in a complex situation involving divine pressures, leads to a terrible curse. Her inability to then express her true love for Narcissus due to this curse highlights the torment of being misunderstood and the vital importance of genuine communication in relationships. Her fading away from grief is a stark depiction of the destructive power of hopeless passion and rejection. Our quirky tidbit for this final section is the enduring presence of Echo and Narcissus as archetypes in art, literature, and psychology across the centuries. From Renaissance paintings to modern poetry, their story has been reinterpreted and re-explored countless times, each generation finding new meanings in their tragic entanglement. Echo often symbolizes voicelessness, longing, and the feminine experience of being unheard or relegated to a reflective role. Narcissus, of course, became the namesake for narcissism, a psychological term describing excessive self-love and a lack of empathy. Their myth is not just an ancient story, it's a living part of our cultural and psychological vocabulary. It's amazing how a tale of a chatty nymph and a pretty boy from Ovid still pops up in everything from serious psychoanalysis to slightly sarcastic dating advice columns. Is your new beau a bit too fond of his own reflection? Might be a Narcissus, darling. And are you just agreeing with everything he says? Classic Echo. Scholars and literary critics continue to debate the ultimate moral or message of the combined Echo and Narcissus myth. Is it primarily a story about divine justice, a warning against vanity, Narcissus, and misused speech? Echo, an exploration of the tragic nature of love and desire, or perhaps a more complex meditation on themes of identity, reflection, and the relationship between self and other. The richness of the myth allows for all these interpretations and more. It doesn't offer easy answers, but it beautifully articulates enduring human vulnerabilities and failings. So, the nymph Echo, who began as a vibrant, talkative spirit of the mountains, ends as a disembodied voice, a sound that only reflects, never originates. Her journey from full-bodied presence to mere acoustic phenomenon is a story of divine anger, misplaced talent, unrequited love, and profound sorrow. Her legacy is the very sound that bears her name, a haunting reminder that our words have power, that love can be both beautiful and devastating, and that even in the loneliest places, a voice might just answer back, carrying the faint, sad whisper of a nymph who loved and lost and faded into sound itself. As the quiet of the night envelops you, and the story of echo settles into the recesses of your mind, perhaps you can appreciate the stillness, the potential for your own original thoughts to emerge in the calm. Echo's tale, in its sorrow, underscores the preciousness of having a voice, of being able to speak your own heart, your own truth. It's a reminder of the delicate interplay between sound and silence, between expressing oneself and truly hearing another. May you find your own voice clear and your rest deep, as the world outside softens into the gentle embrace of the night. The rustling leaves, the distant sigh of the wind, perhaps they too carry faint, ancient whispers, if only we listen closely enough.